I want to say good evening to everyone out there that's listening in this evening. This is Greg Rashid, your host, your guide for the Soul Seeker Show. And if you're new to this program, we come on every Wednesday and Friday night, Mountain Time, 7 p.m. Mountain Time, until, I say until, sometimes we go an hour, sometimes we may go 2 hours, based on the guest. But we did a special show last night. We had a show about the George Zimmerman verdict and had a lively conversation. And the conversation actually was very peaceful in the sense that folks didn't get riled up and they said their piece and they said everything in a positive light, and I was glad of that. And the purpose of this show is to seek information out there to mold your universe inside and out, your mind, your body, and spirit. And we may not agree on everything, but I want you to at least look at the information I talk about, make a decision on your own, and, really search out knowledge to benefit yourself. Don't just take everything at face value and wait for someone to tell you what to do. You have to be your own leader, your own director. And that's what a lot of folks are really saying last night on the Soul Seeker Show. But I am honored to have tonight on this show I want to say a legend in American history, I say. And he's a marketing communications pioneer, founder, and former CEO of Burrell Communications. He's in the Advertising Hall of Fame. He has done so much, revolutionized the image of African Americans in television, changed the face of American advertising, and that's a lot to do that. And he's the founder also of the Resolution Project. And who I'm talking about, and I hope he's on the line right now, is Tom Burrell, author also of the book Brainwashed. Are you there, Tom?
I'm here, Greg.
All right. Just happy to have you on. And I have to explain to the
happy to be here.
Listeners that Tom's going through he'll be going through a surgical procedure tomorrow. So we're going to keep him as long as we can, but if you got to go, Tom, you got to go.
Okay, well, don't make it sound too grave now. It's
okay, it's not good.
Routine.
What
I want to tell all you listeners out there is take care of your health.
That's it.
Don't die needlessly. There's some things we can't help, but there's some things we can't help by just getting checkups.
That's it. Always get a checkup. Always do that. But I'm just happy to have you.
PSA, colonoscopy, general checkups, general exams. Take care of yourself.
That's
I'm a big advocate for that.
I am too. I always stress that on this show and other shows I've done, because some of us really take more care of our cars or our gardens or what clothes we wear rather than the health our own health.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
I would have to say too that's one of the things that we deal with as a people, because we have been so conditioned and so systematically brainwashed to devalue ourselves and put more stock in the things that we put on us than the things we put in us. And we have to really try to correct that kind of centuries-old conditioning that we are less than, and therefore, in order to be equal, we've got to basically embellish that lesser thing called ourselves. So I'm a huge proponent of thinking more of ourselves. And I often say, you really can't. You can talk about saving the world. You can talk about saving the country. You can talk about saving your community. You can talk about saving your family. You can talk about saving your marriage and your children. But you can't save anything unless you save yourself.
That's certainly right.
You have to start from the inside out, and then move on. As they say on the plane, when they have the public announcement, first put on your mask. Put on your oxygen mask, and then take care of everybody else. So
that's it. You got to take care of yourself first.
Yeah,
I'm glad you're doing that. And let's just get right into the book Brainwashed, because I want to ask you, I was talking about the book, rereading it, because I've interviewed you a couple of years ago when the book first came out. But I want to talk to you in light of what has gone on over the weekend with the George Zimmerman verdict and all, and how that fits into the whole process of brainwashing. I want you to talk about that.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of elements there, Greg, that are operating here. As a matter of fact, a major part of the issue has to do with the devaluation of African-American men that started, as we discussed before, started at the dawn of the beginning of this country. And that is, it was necessary in order to devalue African Americans, particularly men, in order to justify slavery, and to justify slavery within what was called a democracy. So this whole idea of what do you do to justify it? Well, we have to prove that these people are not human. So when George Zimmerman got out of his truck, followed, stalked, and whatever else he did to this young 17-year-old boy, and in a place where they have this thing called stand your ground, he was the one in the final verdict that was not given the right to stand his ground. And so, to whatever degree he justifiably defended himself against a strange man following him in the dark,
right
near his home, whatever he had to do to try to defend himself got discounted and basically eliminated. So this man who was following him, who wound up shooting him through the heart, left him out in the street to die like a dog or any dead animal, which is what we have often been, animals is what we've often been cast as. He didn't scream, he didn't holler, he didn't say, "Oh my God, what have I done?" You know, he didn't call the ambulance. Is there anything I can do? No. He had already demonized him, already dehumanized him, and that's consistent with what I talk about in the book, about how we have been animalized and demonized through propaganda to be less than, to be seen as less than human, or certainly less than white people. So George Zimmerman was able to go to the police station without handcuffs, just walk in on his own and say, yeah, I shot him and I killed him, and yeah, but it was self-defense. And the police said, "Oh, okay, all right." It was just black.
And he's lying out in the rain, dead.
You know, and on his way to being a man, and no more. So it's okay. Go home. Forget about it. It means nothing. And then that was further expanded in the trial, how he, as the victim of the crime, was painted as the perpetrator of the crime, walking home on his own, minding his own business, without weapon, and all of a sudden he gets characterized as the perpetrator of the crime, because the shooter wound up with some scratches on his head. That's basically what the issue is that we talk about in the book, and of course we further go on to talk about how images, I'm coming at it from a marketing communications perspective, and talk
right.
about how images help to play such a major role, as a matter of fact, in affecting attitudes and behavior. And what Zimmerman saw that night was not a human being. He saw what he had been trained to see whenever he sees a young black male. He's been trained to see a thug, a miscreant, a person who, at the bottom of it, doesn't deserve to be trusted, doesn't deserve to be respected, doesn't deserve, in the final analysis, to live. And so where do these images come from? Well, we see these images of the violent, thuggish black male being spread all over the place and bombarding both the white and the black public, 24/7. And some people,
and before you go on, Tom, I want
some people who don't have a lot of contact with black men. That's all they know is what they see on television and what they see on videos and on the news reports. And that's what they know. That's how they learn what a black man is. So that's what we basically see going on, operating.
And listeners, you can join in to talk to Tom Burrell at 424-675-8315. Again, 424-675-8315. I want to ask you, Tom, too, along those lines about, some folks have been bringing up the issue of black-on-black crime this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want you to, because you mentioned that you get into a chapter about that in the book, and I just want to talk about that.
That is an issue, and it's a puzzling issue on the surface, how we basically can overlook, like on the weekend, I believe it might have been the weekend that the jury was hearing the closing statements that in one neighborhood of one city, that city being my city, Chicago, I think there were 72 shootings. I believe that there were anywhere from 7 to 12 deaths, and I believe that maybe 7 of those 12, I may be getting the numbers wrong, but the point is that many of those were young people. And when I say young people, not yet adult. So one does have to ask the question, why are we just focusing on this one incident where one black boy on his way to being a black man was slaughtered in the streets? It gets down to the issue of, how are we measuring the value of human life? Is the life of Trayvon Martin more valuable than the life of all those nameless, faceless children who were killed in sevenfold in the weekend? And a big part of the answer has to do with the media. What happened with the Trayvon Martin case is that the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman case happens to be, pardon me for saying, good television. It's good entertainment. You have a built-in breaking news, because every day when the trial starts, something interesting is going to happen, and people are going to watch it. And like any good show, you've got to have the drama. And in the course of unveiling the drama, and we like intrigue and we like violence. I mean, that's something that has been fed into the American DNA, the love of violence. We're kind of grounded in a culture of violence, and have always been from the very beginning. So what basically happens is that we get to know Trayvon Martin as a human being. Joseph Stalin, of all people, I'm quoting here, once said that if you kill a single person and you get to know that person, that's a tragedy. if you kill 1 million people and you don't get to know them, that's a statistic. And the thing that makes this case with Trayvon Martin so poignant is that we got to know him. We got to know, even though there were others who were trying to cast him as a demon, as a thug, we really got to see that we're talking about a human life here. So what basically happens is that we don't have the same feeling for those 7 kids who basically are faceless and nameless. We don't even know their name. We haven't bothered to know their name. The media hasn't fed that up to us, and we haven't demanded it. Now, here's another thing, Greg, that we don't talk about. When the way this thing went down, and the way that this man stalked this kid and shot him down in cold blood, and we stand by. We say that we are thinking about Trayvon. We are thinking about Trayvon, but something else we're thinking about? We're thinking about ourselves, and we're thinking about our past, and we're thinking about our history, and we're thinking about our ancestors. We used to, this kind of thing happened in our history while we were enslaved, and all of the slaves were brought out to watch a slave being victimized, punished, tortured, killed. We had to watch, and we had to watch helplessly. We couldn't do anything. And sometimes we were even forced to participate in that torture. And so what is happening here is this kind of indignity, this humiliation that we are still being disrespected in this way. I will kill you. I will kill yours. I will be in your face. I will do it. I'll do whatever I want to do with you. I will shoot you down like a dog. And you know what? You just have to stand there and take it. And that's what's infuriating. And just tell me any lie. Just say, oh, hey, he circled the car. Just say, I was looking at the street sign. Just say he grabbed my gun. Just say anything. And he says, I can say it, and I don't have to worry. I am going home. I am taking out these manacles, and I am going home. I don't have to sweat it. And you can see, at least in your mind, you see the smirk. You see the arrogance, the hubris that says, I can continue to abuse you, and you can't do anything about it. And on a human level, frankly, as much as I talk about the injustice or the inequity of attention being paid to the black kids in the community who are being killed by each other, there's something that gets to your soul when outside people come in and do things to you and control you with the idea that you can't do anything about it. So we're grieving for ourselves as well as for Trayvon. That the idea that you can just, the phrase spray on our leg and tell us it's raining.
That's right.
I'm fixing it up for media here. Just tell us anything. Just say, hey, this 158-pound kid attacked this 210-pound martial arts guy, who knew everything about stand your ground. And that's all we have to do. And then you can go home. Yeah. You go home. It's the audacity. It's the disrespect. It's the in-your-face aspect of this thing that really has me. I think that's me going, and I think it has a lot of people going. And so that's basically, I think, the difference in why, while we look at what's happening in our communities as an issue and a problem, there's something that just galls us about this kind of abuse that you can. And it's the same thing about using the N-word. It's that hey, when you do it to us, it does feel different. It does feel different, and we have to face that reality. It does face. It's a little bit, Greg, like whether you believe in spanking your kid or not. Even if you do, you don't want other people spanking your kid. That's the human nature side of it. Now, on a totally rational level, it doesn't make any sense to say that this is only about the loss of a human life, because we're losing human lives, by the score, and it doesn't somehow get to us like this does. So we have to ask the question, why is that? Because I can't, as much as a human life ought to be valued, I can't say that Trayvon's life was worth any more than this 5-year-old who got killed on his front porch in Inglewood. Can I? Why? What's the basis of that?
No, I don't.
So there is something else going on here that we aren't really getting to. Why is white on black abuse so galling to us? And we have to go back to that sense memory that takes us back to the beginning of our being totally helpless and their being totally heinous, okay? And totally disrespecting a group of people as people, disregarding them as people. That's where a lot of this stuff is coming from.
And it's all in your book, Brainwashed. And if you're just tuning in, I'm talking to Tom Burrell, legendary, just everything, the legendary advertising person, the man who actually told basically the ad rep that, look, this is how African Americans should be represented. I mean, without Tom, we might still have some Sambo representation in some ads, and we do in another sense, but more blatant. So,
right.
If you're interested, call in at 4. I have a lot of folks that are interested in you coming on, so this is your opportunity to call in. 424-675-8315. 424-675-8315. Now I want to ask you too, Tom, about what do you think? Because I've gotten into some discussions with folks about after this, and I don't want to keep talking about the verdict, but it is timely and important. It does fit into the book. But what would you suggest people do? Because there have been a lot of marches, demonstrations, but basically marches and rallies around after the verdict. Do you think they're still effective now, as they were in the 60s?
I don't think that they're ineffective. I just think that we need to be more focused on getting to the power source. And getting to the power, I think we start with the logic that what is it that drives this society? I think that we can all agree that this society is basically driven by money. That is how success and power generally gets measured. And we are a society that is driven by the dollar. And we are addicted to it. We are there because for almost all of us, there is no limit. There is no such thing as enough. If you get the bug, you can't get enough. When I was growing up, the ratio between the guy who owned the business and the guy who worked in the business was like 40, 40 to 1. It is now 500 to 1.
That's ridiculous. That's the way it is.
500 to 1, and that's not enough. We live in a society that everything is based on quarters. If you get 100% increase in your stock over one quarter, then that's saying, oh, that's enough that we can hold that for a year. The next quarter after that is, what is the increment over that 100? As a matter of fact, if you did 100 last time, why can't you do 100 again? Right. So there's no such thing as enough. That being the case, we need to find a way to unite our $1 trillion in spending power from our 800 million people, if I get my numbers right, and say we have got to unite against the kind of abuse that we receive, and we have to do it where it hurts the most, and that is in the pocketbook. I just heard this morning that Stevie Wonder has basically declared that he will not perform in any state where there is the stand your ground law. Did I get that right?
No, you're right. You're right. He said Florida in particular. And also there's another entertainment name, Kashif, who said the same thing.
Get out there and make that declaration and make that sacrifice. And believe me, when you start talking about the revenues that get lost, then you're really talking about hurting, putting a hurt on an economy of that state. If we could just figure out the ways to get specific demands that are backed up with specific coercions, then we'll start getting something done. Because if you don't have the coercion and all you have is the demand, then you're counting on goodwill.
Right.
I would not count. That's not to say that people don't have goodwill, but there's an override there. Goodwill is trumped by greed. The desire to do right is trumped by the right to get more, to have more. And if you can throw out the specter that your actions, your negative actions, can cause you to have less, then we can start having seeing some results. It's the Montgomery bus boycott on steroids. I mean, it's as simple as the Montgomery bus boycott, which I constantly refer to as a model for us, a model of unity, a model strategy for getting things changed. And we just don't do it enough.
And what's preventing us?
Well, what's preventing us is the primary thing that's preventing us is the fact that we have systematically over the last almost 400 years been conditioned to work against each other. I mean, it started at the very beginning. It started before we got into the hull, to the bowels of the slave ship. We came from different groups within the African continent. We were pitted against each other. When you pack people up like animals in their own waste and coop them up, it will create a kind of madness that I absolutely marvel that we recovered as well as we did.
Yes, if you hold that thought for a minute, Tom, we have a caller on the line here. let's see if we can get him on here. Are you there, caller? Are you there? You
yes,
have a question or comment?
All right. I have a comment.
Hello? Yes.
Hello.
Yeah. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you. I have a comment. First of all, I want to thank both of you, Greg and Mr. Burrell, for what you've said. And I agree with everything that you said, but I think you're forgetting one important thing.
Well, that could be certainly possible.
Yeah. But see, I agree with, I think all of these rallies and all of this boycott is fine, but I don't think it's going to do any good. The power comes from voting, and people don't vote. All the legislators that make these stand your ground laws, that make all of these laws that people are against, can be voted out if people will vote. But people are so apathetic these days that a lot of people just say, well, my vote won't count, so they don't vote. And so the core people that support these outrageous laws do vote, and that's how they stay in. We need to mobilize people to go out and vote and get those people out of there so we can change the laws. That's what needs to be done, in my opinion.
Well, I don't disagree with you at all. I certainly don't think that hurts at all. There are certain apparatus in place in many of these places that, and I'm not excusing the people who sit home and say I'm not going to vote, but there are, the gerrymandering and all these other things that can make that process even challenging. But I'll bet you one thing. There's nobody out here who is trying to get you not to buy their stuff. So I think we need to do all of those things, and I'll bet you that one thing, that economic power can also drive what happens in the legislatures of these states, where I think the real issue is at the state level. And like the whole issue of gerrymandering. I mean, the Republicans have this totally specious hold on us because they have state legislatures that basically draw these redistricting in a way that they can't lose. So
I know, and that's outrageous.
I do agree with you that we do need to get out and vote, and we have been basically we've done it. We came out for Obama, but the big problem that we do have is that we have a hard time sustaining an action. Sometimes we think that we function as if everything is a sprint, and as one of the people said at the convention, it's not a sprint, it's not a marathon, it's a relay. And I think that we have to basically think long term. The problem with voting for a lot of these people is it doesn't yield immediate enough results, and we've got to recondition ourselves to think, long term. So I am totally with you about getting people to vote, and I shake my head the same way that you do. That even with all these obstacles, we still need to get out and do it. And we actually demonstrated in the last election our ability to do that, because I was concerned about Ohio and Pennsylvania and all these places. But they got us riled up, and we came out. And that's what we got to do.
That's what we need to continue to do. You're right.
Yeah, we got to get riled up, and we got to get out. But we also have to discipline ourselves. I can do without these gym shoes. I can do without this coat and this purse and this food item. I can do without it if it's going to move us forward. But
for a greater objective. Right?
Yeah, I can do without this concert. I can do without this CD. I can, we haven't even talked about the role that media messaging plays. I mean, at the same time that we're talking about these things that damage us, we're continuing to consume the messages that keep reinforcing.
And Colin, I want to thank you. We got someone else on the line here. Thanks a lot for calling in.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And we got another caller on line. Tom, are you there?
Okay.
Yes. Hi, Mr. Burrell.
Hey.
Big fan of your work. Good evening.
Thank you.
Everything that you're speaking of, the voting, the buying, or the boycott, as we're calling it, to keep people from buying things, each of these things will require some kind of re-education, right? And that's the way I look at the work that you've done. I know propaganda is a bad word, but there is a process of re-education. So how would one go about creating a campaign to get people to think differently about each of these things, even the voting? We have gerrymandering. I don't even know if we have the numbers anymore as a people to make a significant difference, but creating a campaign to help people understand or reorient their thinking towards what is actually possible, because none of the things that I've heard you discuss are possible unless people change the way they think about the outcomes for the future.
Well, fortunately, there are not everybody is thinking the same way. There are some people who are already thinking. What we've got to do is we've got to keep doing the kind of thing we're doing right now and try to stop. It's like building a snowball. You got to start somewhere, and you get the 3 people who understand, and then tell the other 3 people, and get 6 people until you get a critical mass. And then once you get a critical mass, then you can say, okay, now who can we put the pressure to get more critical mass? And then who do we go after? Do we go after a record company? Do we go after a network? And we focus. You can't get everybody at the same time. You focus. You've got to have trials, and you've got to have examples. And then you say, okay, here's what we're going to do. Going back to the Montgomery bus boycott, we're not going to take this bus.
I guess these concepts exist, but I'm literally thinking, based on your specific expertise, there's a certain way to speak to people. There's a certain way to present concepts. It really is about mental manipulation, right?
Yes, it is.
This is how advertising works.
That's right.
So even though we are wanting to build momentum and get people on board, word of mouth is not sufficient. There has to be...
I'm not even talking about word of mouth.
Celebrity inclusion, or, very specifically, do we need to get celebrities on board to...
Very specifically, the best avenue we have right now is the avenue we're using right now, and that is the new technology. That is the new frontier that has where it hasn't been corralled, it hasn't been reined in, so that we don't have a voice. We can still go on YouTube. We can still create our own messages. We can still go on the internet and create our own messages, and that's what we're doing right now.
That's the mode. Pardon? That's the delivery mode, but we need. What's the message? I know I'm pressing you, and I'm sure.
Oh, that's good. That's fine. That's good.
But there's a message. We see how it works, the propaganda machine. There's a specific message that needs to be transmitted to people so that they understand, this is not in your best interest. And simply saying that is not enough, because you can't just tell them not to buy more shoes and not to consume more foods that are making them fat. But there's a very specific, just in the same way that you worked in advertising.
Okay.
You sat down in a room and you figured out, how can we make these people buy this thing? How can we unmake them?
You're answering that question. You've got to get those people, and you got to sit them down in a room, and you got to start devising those kinds of messages. I will say this, that you have to tap into the basic human emotions that move people. What are some of those? One of them is being played out right now. One of them was played out during the election when the Republican guys said, "Hey, you know what? We're going to do voter suppression and we'll win." And we said, "What? You're going to stand there and tell us that you're going to? I mean, you have the nerve to just say that's what you're going to do?" It goes back to what Malcolm said about you've been duped, you've been had, you've been took.
Bamboozled.
When you start getting people riled up about being disrespected, that's one of the things that we did inherit from our slave master, the whole Scots-Irish respect thing, that whole thing about you step on, and of course that's one of the things that's leading to this terrible gang violence. You step on my foot, I'll step on your foot. You know, that you can't do that to me. So we've got to touch. That's one of the hot buttons that we have to touch. Do you see what they're doing to you? They are making a fool out of you. You know, what are you going to do? Let me tell you a commercial that was done by Spike Lee for McDonald's. It was two boxers, and one boxer was the one we were focusing on, and he was getting beat up like crazy. And his father was his trainer, and so this guy, he's bloody and he said, "Man, you gotta get this thing together. You gotta beat this guy." And then he came to his idea. He says, "You see that guy over there that you're fighting? Do you remember when you were 7 years old and you were coming back from McDonald's and he stole your French fry?" That's who that was. It was him. and so the guy gets up and all you hear is the sound, boom, 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 boom. I mean, we have got to get people to get into this idea. We will not be disrespected. And you got to touch
your
that
primal
button.
instincts, right?
Yeah.
Right.
You got to touch that button that says, no, we're not going to, because I think there's a basic drive for respect. You know, the thing that distinguishes us from the other species is that we have, you know, we always talk about love. You know, love is not the real driving force as much as respect is the driving force for human beings. I mean, I love my dog. I feel my dog. There were slave masters who loved their slaves. They didn't respect them. So the thing that raises us up is the whole concept of respect, and we have a basic primal need for respect, even if it's done in a very pathological way, like what happens with these gangs out here. You know, so that's one hot button that we can get it started. Now, having said that, I will also say this, and that is that I have really worked to try to discipline myself to bring problems to people so that they can participate in bringing solutions, as opposed to my bringing problems and giving them the solutions. That was my basic approach in running my company, with my people coming to me with ideas. I want to give you the problem. I want you to give me the solution. That's part of what our problem is that we're sitting there. You know, I go to book fairs, and people go, hey, they walk around the book like it's something wrong with it. You know, staring at, you know, what is this? This is a book? Did you write this book? Yeah. What's it about? Well, I'm telling them what it's about. Oh, what's in it? Then you say, well, what is it that you are saying we should do? Well, I think one thing you should do is read the book. Because everybody wants to be spoon-fed answers, and
let me say,
all that does.
On that,
no, not you. I'm not talking about you now.
No. I'm not even referring to myself. There's a created dependency in our society, right? People don't want to read. They don't want to think. They want to be told.
Right.
And should we not also use that, though? Because they're not necessarily.
Go ahead. You use it up to a point, but one of the things you want to use is some of those persuasive skills to get them to think. You know, to get them to understand that they are capable of thinking and doing it. Boy, when you get them to do that, then all kinds of magical things happen. You know,
right? They feel empowered.
Yeah, and when people feel empowered, I mean, it multiplies the impact, because you can. It's like you get 10 people. Are you going to think for these 10 people and drag them along with you, and you're going to get tired because you're doing all this thinking, or are you going to give them the ability to think, which means that not only do you not get tired, but you can actually get 10 people thinking, and maybe you can move 10 times faster. So it's
right.
the delegation.
I mean, it's the difference between teaching them to fish, right? We want to teach them to fish.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's the idea of delegating authority with responsibility. And giving people a chance to grow, and that's how we get, you know, this kind of exponential kind of growth. And so, when people say, "Well, what's the solution?" I will say, "Okay, now you read the book, and I want you to come to me with thoughts and ideas about what some of the solutions are." You know, I'm 74 years old. You know, what's going to happen? Wow. What's going to happen next? You know, what's the next step?
Right.
Where's the next wave? Who's going to come in and say, okay, now I'm going to build on it? It's just like I say, it's a relay. It's not a sprint or a marathon. It's a relay.
Right.
Who's going to come
caller, thank you very much.
Who's going to build on what we have started?
Right.
Who's going to do the next
the only other thing I'd like to say is thank you, Mr. Burrell. I so appreciate the opportunity to kind of pick your brain. And
well, I appreciate your call. I appreciate your thoughtfulness.
I do too. Thank you very much. All right.
Be well. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to piggyback on that, because don't we have a generation, or a couple of generations now, of folks who are playing video games where they're not thinking for themselves. They're given a role to play, but the script is already written.
Well, the script has been written for all of us, and the script that was written for me was passed down to that generation, and the script that they're given will be passed down. You know, the one thing that we have a tendency to do is we look at the generations after us and say, what happened to them? Well, we happened to them. They didn't come out of the womb like that. We created them.
Right.
We propped them up in front of the television and had the television raise them, you know, parent them. You know, we basically had a hand in creating our children. You know, and what we do to our children is the same thing that white people have done to black people. We help create the problem, and then we blame them for the problem.
So how do folks begin to flip their script? And you've mentioned some of it, but that's what's in the book.
There again, the biggest problem that I have, Greg, is getting people to internalize the message, especially to internalize the importance of propaganda. You know, I have been part of a member of organizations that embrace, in a way, at least on a topical level, what I'm saying, and whether they be about education, whether they be about after-school programs, whether they be about, you know, teacher training, or whether they be about housing or economics, it's very difficult to get them. I mean, we can go through 3-hour meetings, and this whole issue of the media never comes up. And at the same time, it's the 800, 900-pound gorilla in the room that is really controlling us.
That's
and I try all the different ways that I can to get the point across. I talk about Rwanda, and I talk about the civil rights movement and how television revolutionized the civil rights movement and created the Civil Rights Act. How Rwanda wound up, you know, taking people who were neighbors and husbands and wives and just radio programming led to most heinous slaughter, I mean, perhaps in our history. 100 days, 800,000 people in 100 days slaughtered.
And we're more interested.
We're not talking about countries fighting each other. We're talking about neighbors killing each other.
And that's something a lot of our folks, a lot of people in general, don't even know about.
Yeah. You talk about the civil rights movement. You talk about the power of one movie. In 1919, I believe it was, that basically started race riots all over the country. And white people coming out of the movie theaters killing people.
Yeah, that birth of a nation.
So we spend billions of dollars on advertising every year. Why do you think these corporations who are really, really protective of their dollars, why are they spending billions of dollars on television, commercials? Because it works. It works. Propaganda works. Media messaging works. So if it works for that, and if it works to create presidents, it works to create product sales, why can't it work to change our minds about who we are? Why can't we get that?
And you talk about in the book there was a brief period of time in the 60s and early 70s when that was happening.
Yes.
And I kind of know the answer, but there are a lot of folks in the audience who don't. What changed?
What changed is that we went down to protest, and they were hiring that day. Okay, we went down to protest, and those who were leading the protest got taken out. They got taken out because the whole concept of the acceptable exception was operating. If you can take out the people and co-opt the people who are leading it, then you take away the head, and the rest goes away. So what happened is that we went down to protest, and they were hiring that day, at least the leader. And so we weren't able to sustain it. The other thing that happens is fatigue sets in. Fatigue sets in, and we delude ourselves into saying, thinking that we won.
Right.
Because we want to win. And so the mind takes over and says we won, because what happened is the complexion or the nature of the problem changed. The degree of the problem didn't necessarily change, but the nature of the problem. It became more subtle. It became more class oriented rather than strictly race. When you can take out the top tier, put them on television, put them in corporate executive positions. I mean, I'm not being an exception to that. I'm one of those people. That very comfortable. Thank you very much. But that's one of the things that happened, and it didn't stick. The idea that was the most important effort, I think, in certainly in the last half of the 20th century. The black power element of the civil rights movement. We are somebody that it certainly spawned a lot of progress for black businesses, because it basically said that black people are not dark-skinned white people, which is what our theme was for our company. Our mantra is that we can be different. We don't have to be integrated into the whole, because somehow it seems that is somehow saying that white people are superior. If what progress is for us to, quote, integrate into, integrate means blend, meld, and so let's integrate this black skin, this broad nose, these big lips, all these things that mark many of us, the kinky hair, Let's try to see if we can blend that in with white, blue-eyed blondes. Let's blend it in. And the whole thing is that you can do as much blending as you want. I mean, this is not a soup. These are human beings, and you're still going to be the color you are and with the features you are. And that's still, until you know who you are, until other people really know who you are, you're going to be basically subordinated. You know, when people are accepting, when you are being accepted, that is implicitly racial and racist.
Now I want to
ask
you.
Good for you, good boy. You know, yeah, you're doing that's
right.
That's good for you. You're very articulate. You're intelligent. And speaking of that, I mean, that was one of the real devastating things about the Trayvon Martin case. I guarantee you that had the woman, the girl that he was talking to on the phone, had been more of a Hydea Pendleton type, we would have a whole different level. She had no credibility simply because of the way that she looked and sounded. How can she be the person on the phone who's the last one to hear him and tell her story, and it never gets mentioned again? She was supposed to be the star witness. She didn't say anything that was inconsistent. I mean, she didn't back off of her story. It just got swept away. Because how
it fell right
looks
into
like her and sound like her have any credibility?
Yeah. And that gets back to the brainwashing.
Yeah. And believe me, there were black people writing in as well as white people saying, this is terrible, this is embarrassing, she's so...
I saw some of the stuff on social media. I mean, it was just awful. Our own folks saying some nasty things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The defense said, hey, we don't have to even worry about her.
No.
So
we get,
so I mean, those are some of the dynamics that we have to work on, and that's what is basically fed by media messages about who we are. People who look a certain way and talk a certain way. I mean, the defense attorney asked if she could speak English.
Yeah.
He didn't ask her, are you nervous because, you don't go out and testify like this every day? Are you hurt because you were the last one to see him alive? Can you speak English? So,
what does the word cracker mean? I mean, things like that.
There's, we know that there are words spoken of what constitutes prejudice, and we know that a lot of things that people say are not what they actually mean and what they actually feel.
Speaking of media, can you hang in there a little more for a while,
okay.
Tom?
Okay.
A few more minutes up. As far as media images, I want to get into some folks that are very popular now. In particular, Tyler Perry, because you say something about him in the book as well as Lil Wayne, and just talk about the image that he's projecting, of folks like that, what they're projecting out there.
What image are they projecting?
Yeah, like Tyler Perry, for instance.
I think they're basically appealing to the baser needs and the baser instincts of audiences, both black and white. What people want to see, first of all, what society does is it assigns different groups of people different roles. Each group has a kind of implicit role in society, whether it be, inferiors, superior, entertainers. You are entertainers, you are our athletes, you are our workers, you are our gardeners, you are our waiters, you are our professors, you are our leaders. There are always exceptions to it, but generally speaking, if you're a financial person and you're not Jewish and you're integrating into the financial, strata. If you are a basketball player and you're not black, you're integrating into,
That's right.
The role. So basically, what is happening is we're basically assigned our roles, and it gives people comfort to see those roles being affirmed. So I don't want to think of people as being angry with me. So if I've abused you, and I think that I'm afraid that you're angry, that I see you laughing and acting like the picture that I've painted of you, that's comforting. That's like comfort food. It's like comfort food
right.
for the senses, And then I will raise you up, and I will pedestalize you. I'll put you on a pedestal, and because that makes me feel good. That's the kind of the Tracy Morgan kind of phenomena. Boy, he is.
Oh yeah.
He makes me feel. He makes me feel good because he plays back to me the image that I created of people like him. Okay.
Just like Stephen
Fitz. He seems to be happy with it, and that's fine. So that basically is what is driving that kind of success. And of course, because black people also are brainwashed, we have been conditioned to be entertained. We want relief. And relief usually comes as comic relief. Never mind the fact that, as one author says, we perhaps are amusing ourselves to death. We certainly are entertaining ourselves to death. And that's one of the reasons we can't get any place, because, we are looking for relief. We're looking for comic relief, even if it's at our own expense. So we buy into it, and we discount the damage that it's doing to reinforce us as clowns. When you put other people in, they don't go to. Many of us don't go to the trouble of putting other races in those same roles and say, okay, now what is it if this character were white? What would white people say? Well, they wouldn't accept it, but we do. And so.
And I want to ask you, Tom, too, did you ever think that you would still see these type of stereotypes in the 21st century, growing up and seeing, Amos and Andy Step and Fetch It and the Mammy characters? Did you think that you would still see that in a different way, but the same type of characters in the 21st century?
Well, actually, no. But what basically happened is that we've had a kind of a cycle that has taken place, and it's a kind of a paradox of progress that I kind of speak to in the book. We go from slavery to Jim Crow, and we go from Jim Crow to de facto segregation, and then we go to what we want to think of as post-racial, after the race, after the racial tension is gone. That we want to be, both black people and white people share this desire for, why can't this just be over? We didn't want to. Neither side wants to talk about it. One side doesn't want to talk about it out of guilt. The other side doesn't want to talk about it out of shame. But we can agree that we don't want to talk about it. So we don't talk about it, and then that gets, along with the assignment of some of our acceptable exceptions, to key positions in society, President of the United States, Chairman of the Board of various Fortune 500 companies, head of the university, blah, 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 so forth. Etc. So that gives us that kind of illusion that we don't have to think about it anymore. So what happens when you don't think? What happens when you don't think about it, and the problem is still there? Then these images start because the problem hasn't been resolved. We see these images projected that look just like the images that happened at the very beginning. There's very little difference between the Tracy Morgan character and the characters on Amos and Andy. But
that's right.
But we don't. But the people don't see it on a conscious level because we're post-racial now. So what happens when you're post-racial? We can relax and just let things happen naturally. And then when you complain about it, why are you bringing all this racial stuff up? We're through with that. So the irony of it is that don't bring up this racial stuff and let us do these racial stereotypes. Why don't you leave us alone? Let us do it because it doesn't bother anything anymore.
Right. And that's it.
Because
that's the thing.
People are basically looking at the acceptable exceptions and then looking at the underbelly of what's happening in our society. So that's a big part of the scam.
Now, I'm curious. Book came out, Brainwashed came out 2 years ago, and have you gotten any folks like a Tyler Perry or someone who's known who you criticize in the book for stereotype and all? Have they come back to you and said, "No, man, that's not what I'm doing"?
No.
Nobody.
No. And and I understand that because I get two basic reactions from the book. I get the positive and the neutral. The neutral is silence. It's kind of a stonewalling kind of a thing.
Right.
Because it's a way of saying, hey, you don't matter, and what you say doesn't exist. And it doesn't matter because I've got an empire here and I've got money here. And so you're basically you're a speck on an elephant's ass, and you can become that by virtue of being ignored. So the irony is that if you're talking about media and you talk about media being a big part of the problem, the irony is that your voice is limited because media is not going to have you on talking about media being the problem. That's suicidal.
Yeah,
so
they're not going to do that.
All they have to do is just don't call you on. Don't have you. And then with the idea that if you're not in the media, just like the Trayvon Martin case versus the 7 other kids who get killed that weekend, they don't exist. If you're not in the media, you don't exist. So that's part of the strategy. Is not to give it any ink, not give it any play. So no, I have not gotten any playback because if there was something really meaningful, people would say they would say it. But I made it a point to really do due diligence in putting the book together. And no one has come to me yet to say that you got it all wrong because all I'm basically doing is reporting. I'm reporting more than I'm commenting. I'm basically passing on their images and their words that they created.
And it's up to them,
You can't. It's kind of hard to argue with yourself.
Yeah, that certainly is true. That is true. Now, I got one more question here, and you listeners, if you have a question for Tom Burrell, this is your opportunity to do this. He's a legend. The number again is 424-675-8315. 424-675-8315. I want to ask you now, what would you add now, 2 years later after the book has been published? would you add another chapter, what you've seen since then? Have things kind of improved, or has it on the same plane, or is there any hope or anything?
Well, there are a few things I would do if I had a chance to do it again or do it some more. I would actually spend a little bit more time in developing, solutions. I would also have more corollaries because part of what is happening in our society has implications for the broader society.
Right.
One of the things that's happening that we don't know is because of the power, the influence of black culture on white culture, particularly white youth culture. Some of the issues, some of the brainwashing that is going on towards African Americans is being taken up by young white kids. The only thing that's different, of course, is that they have a better chance to escape from it. You probably have some experience in seeing how young white kids can go through changes and become radical and become.
Oh yeah.
And then
I always call it slumming.
Then they get through the stage, and then they put on their suit and they go to Wall Street.
Right.
And get over it. We don't get over it. We don't get out of that groove so easily. So because nobody will let us, we have no place to go. We don't have as many papas and cousins and cronies to and sponsors.
Right.
So I would concentrate more on what some of the fallout of some of this stuff is. Because when you're engaged in hypocrisy, engaged in, I guess, what I call duplicity, and as well as hypocrisy, it's sometimes hard to control who it affects when you're on the airways. Because if I'm portraying negative images of a group of people, but at the same time I'm putting out aspects of that group that people can admire, like their musical prowess or whatever, then I'm going to start imitating them. If I'm sexually objectifying black entertainers who are basically sexually objectifying their audience, if I'm a white entertainer and I want to be cool, then I'm going to hold my stuff, grab my privates and take off my clothes the same way that my models, my paradigms, my role models.
A.K.A. Justin Timberlake, for instance.
Yeah. And so you get a lot of problems with what's going on even in our suburban schools. Like, for instance, misogyny. Misogyny is rampant,
Right.
So you get girls in high school, white girls in suburbs saying, well, if Chris hit Rihanna, it must have been because she deserved it. And it saying, well, it's okay if I get hit. As a matter of fact, if Chris wants to hit me, I'll be happy to get hit. And then you got the guys, doing the male jock thing and beating the hell out of these girls and abusing these women and these young girls in high school. So they have access to the internet and some of these images the same way that the black kids do.
And they're looking at it and everything.
Yeah. So I focus a little bit on the solution. Of course, the other thing too is I would have an index, which sometimes frustrates me that I don't have an index where I can look up topics, go back to it. I have to use my memory. But that's about it. I would have it would be perhaps a book on just things like that.
Hey, the book is great. I was just happy to reread it again. I interviewed you. We talked 2 years ago, and it's just as good. I picked up even more just looking at it again. I said, man, I missed this point the first time. It's like, my goodness. And
I do the same thing, Greg. I have to say.
It's really, it's for, and the book is for everyone, because I know there's some listeners out there saying, I guess this is just a black person only topic and book, but it's for everyone.
I have gotten really, really positive feedback from non-black readers. I really, really have.
Because the brainwashing is all about everyone's being brainwashed.
Yeah, that's exactly what the feedback that I've gotten. Because it's not about demonizing a group of people, because there are really, really issues, problems associated with people being stereotyped and trained to think of themselves as superior. I mean, that's a very big problem, because there's some part of our being that knows that that's not true. And when are we going to get discovered? When are we going to find out? And if we have basically mistreated people, when will we see our revenge? When will we get our revenge? I mean, when will they reap their revenge on us? I mean, it's all that kind of, those kinds of...
you always, there's that underlying fear.
Yeah.
That's going to happen.
Yeah. And that's why some of these images are so comforting. When, the laughing, smiling, happy, everything is fine, images of black people. It's like, whew, sigh of relief.
When do you think there ever is going to be a real dialogue on, white supremacy, racism? I know the Clinton administration tried to do it with John Hope Franklin and others in the mid-'90s.
I have maybe a fairly unique perspective on that, and I don't think that they can ever be dialogue until there's monologue. I mean, I think that we have got to, if you're talking about one race talking to another race, we have got to talk to each other. We have got to figure out, it's a little bit like if you've been diagnosed as mentally ill or mentally off balance, which I think, in a sense, we have a right to be all on both sides. And you say, well, why don't you guys get together, you two sick people, and see if you can work out your problems. You can't work out problems when two people, when you get two crazy people together.
That's right.
You got to go to your neutral
you both got a sickness
and get well. And then when you get well, then you can have constructive, conversations as a people, because as long as you're having this, one of the things you'll notice about all the conversations is that they're topical. They're not. They're epidural. They're not deep. They don't get down to the source. They want to talk about topical stuff. And as long as you're talking about topical, you're not solving any problems. So from year to year, you're saying the same old thing, and you say a few things, and then you say, well, we talked, and now let's go home. There is no plan. There is no accountability. There's no saying. We have got to get to the root of the problem and start digging out of it. It's not being done, and that's what we need to do.
You're right. You're so right, Tom. And I just want to thank you for being on this evening and just imparting your wisdom and knowledge.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
And I just, give them the email address or phone numbers where people can contact you.
Well, I'm at TJ Burrell mac.com.
And the book is on, was it Smiley Books? Smiley Books.
Well, it's Smiley Books, yeah. The book is available on Amazon.
But you can get it on Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is already a collector's item.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
It's an amazing book that should be. Have you been offered any opportunities to teach a course on it?
Probably somewhere. I spend a lot of time speaking at colleges and universities.
Right.
And I think that's the way I kind of want to do it right now, to basically spread around. I've been all over the country at the various universities and colleges, and high schools, by the way.
That's great. That's something. Yeah, that's it. But I just want to thank you again, Tom.
Okay. Well, thank you.
And I'll be,
appreciate
thinking about you tomorrow as you go through your procedure and everything. And just thank
right.
you. It's not as bad. I keep saying it. No, don't worry, listeners. No, everything's fine.
I think you handled it very well.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
and forgot to ask you too, and I'm glad that someone on Facebook has said, what about the Resolution Project?
The Resolution Project is basically non-existent. That was an organization that started before the book was written, and basically, as I said, I'm 74, and I've decided to stop pushing so many rocks up the hill. I'm pretty much limiting myself to speeches, public appearances, and I started what the Resolution Project kind of became was a Howard University media messaging research fellowship.
Oh, okay.
And if the university wants to take it on and move with it, then it hopefully can evolve into media messaging research projects, media messaging research center, whatever the total potential is. But we had we started last year with 4 fellows. We have 1 this year, and 1 graduate student doing a study on color in advertising, color in health, HB&A, health and beauty aids advertising. So, last year, one of the fellows set up a website for the university for media literacy, and another student did a really excellent study on school-aged children and their and rap lyrics. So that's kind of what I've done, with that.
Well, I just want to thank you for doing everything you've done, as far as just your role in just advertising back in the back in the 60s and on, how you changed, let people know that we are human.
Yeah.
The images we were seeing at the time were a whole different thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I thank you for this book, and just thank you for taking the time to come on the show this evening. We got to get you back on again.
Okay, great. Thank you. Enjoyed it.
All right, you take care. Thanks again, Tom.
Bye-bye.
And again, that was Tom Burrell. I hope you enjoyed it. I always enjoy talking to Tom, and he got an opportunity this time to really expound on everything about the book Brainwashed and his, what he's seeing right now. And I hope you enjoyed this show.